bit more, maybe I'll start with a couple of minutes about myself. My name is Siddharth Bhai. I believe that there are a lot of real world problems that can be solved in an elegant way to improve the overall quality of life, and software gives us an opportunity to do just that. I have a knack for motivating teams to go ahead and take on problems that may not always feel the most glamorous. Sometimes there might even be an element of disbelief as to, wait, can we even pull this off? Though I like to channelize that into a winning attitude that answers critical business problems. In terms of my day to day job, I am a product manager lead at Splunk. My team focuses on identity, security, commerce, and customer onboarding for Splunk Cloud customers. Before I came to Splunk not too long ago, I used to work in the Google Cloud product management team. I spent 5 years at Google, and prior to that, 8 years at Microsoft. Most of the time I've spent focused on enterprise software, and a lot of the things that I'll be sharing with you today come from some experiences over the years. Specifically in terms of speaking, doing this in a virtual format is new to me when I'm still learning. I do enjoy going out to conferences and meeting people. So when we get to the Q&A session, yes, please use the chat, the open mic to have a conversation. I like to stay connected. My LinkedIn and Twitter details are on the slides, and look forward to more engagement in the second half today. So starting to get a little bit more, up close into what are we here to talk about today, thought we'd do a session which is more focused on cloud product adoption. In fact, in the breakout rooms, I'm glad I got a chance to speak with some of you. One of the questions was, it is interesting to think about what's unique about cloud environments and what type of insights might we be able to get as we think more deeply about it. And I think one of the things to think about is cloud products seem like they'll offer a lot of benefits. Pretty much every CISO, CTO, a product or an engineering leader would probably find some benefits of cloud appealing. Yet for many of these organizations, when it gets down to actually adopting these cloud products, those brainstorming sessions turn into some pretty complicated discussions. You run into a lot of these real world challenges. For example, you might hear about things like existing line of business applications, industry specific regulations, contracts, security, SLAs. And all of this put together makes adopting cloud services to be a pretty puzzling journey. And so I'm grateful that in this new year, as we kick off 2021, the vaccines are here. However, as this global pandemic has taken hold with more people doing things remotely, the trend of adopting cloud is only accelerating. So now we're looking at a space where there is a huge addressable market. What types of products are turning out to be successful? And even for products that are well thought out, what type of adoption challenges do they run into? What are some things that are unique to enterprise products and especially cloud? And finally, what type of strategies and techniques can we employ as product managers? These are some of the areas we'll focus on. A lot of us are working closely with products and aspiring to build products which are out to solve real world customer problems. So I thought I'd start with you by sharing 6 incidents and stories from actual customer conversations over the years which I've come across myself. And as we unpack these, you'll probably start seeing some of the themes which I'm excited to chat with you about, which tend to be roadblocks for adopting cloud products. So the first customer I'll invite you to join me on this virtual tour is, we'll start off in the Pacific Northwest. This was a few years ago. And this was from an IT admin who used to run a pretty tight ship. Like they had certain types of software, which they very closely vetted, they managed, and they made sure were compliant and were very well run. But the landscape for them started evolving when they had more and more people in their company wanting to access business applications from their personal iPads. And so when they started seeing that even the company's executives and leads were really interested in trying to open up business applications to their personal iPads and devices. This is an era before we had MDM software become as mainstream as it is today. That really drove adoption of that sort of products with that particular company. For the second customer, I'll take you down south. This was from a few years ago when I joined our sales team to go on a trip to Southern California. And we went into this very well run organization. They invited us in, hosted a nice brainstorming strategy session, large conference room, 15 people seated around, a lot of IT leaders actively engaging and sharing their business challenges. And partway through that conversation, I remember a moment very distinctly. I remember that the vice president of information technology for that customer looked across the table and spoke directly to me, looking in my eyes. I'm paraphrasing him, but effectively saying, this person that you see seated here, he's really an expert, a 14-year company veteran. And a lot of our specific implementation details, why are certain things in a different way, if we had to adopt and embrace something new, this person essentially is the main decision maker, is the main leader. And I felt like the part that they left unsaid to me was, well, what would happen if this person was to move on or for anything to get deployed and accepted? This person had to sign off on that deployment. And so you notice this trend of like tribal knowledge and customizations getting built up over the years, which tends to have an impact on product adoption. Continuing further on, our customer conversations, I'm now going to bring you back to the Bay Area. That's where I'm based. I'm based out of South Bay, as are several of you in this chapter. For me, going up to the city, San Francisco, for customer visits, it always tends to be, something I try and make a little bit of a trip out of it. For instance, there's Blue Bottle Coffee. For those of you who are coffee fans like me, I think that's definitely something a highlight of my San Francisco city trips. You'll think about like, how would I get there? Do I take Caltrain? Do I go up in some interesting like corporate luxury buses or what have you? On this instance, one of the product managers on my team had gotten a new Tesla and was super excited and gave us a ride. So we go in the school car to this really cool modern internet company who have an exciting product that really targets millennials. Critics love it. Creative people are all over it. And an hour into that customer meeting, we're starting to get pretty deep on some security considerations. And so we end up talking to them about here's all these security guarantees, here's why our product is going to help meet the use cases that you've shared with us. And we get to that critical juncture, which we often do in these conversations. So will you deploy it? And I get back an interesting answer. What we find out is that we were talking to the right decision maker, but their manager had just a year ago gone ahead and really pushed for the adoption of a different similar product. And although that other product was not really meeting their use cases, it just wasn't the right type of an organizational environment in which they felt they could go ahead and embrace a different product. And so if your decisions maker boss or that department just went through a major overhaul, deployment of a different type of product, then that might end up coming in the way of getting your product deployed. Another type of challenge you might come across, and for this I'll take you with me virtually to the Midwest. This was a customer that was based there. Really good lead into the conversation. The sales team set it up well, sensed that one of our services, cloud services, could really help meet their needs. We had a great kickoff, did our presentation, and then they really left the meeting with, this is starting to sound pretty interesting, sent us a few more details in email. We got back to them. Over the course of a week, we had all the doubts clarified. The customer was excited and said, this is fantastic. Let's set up a POC meeting in 2 weeks. And so 2 weeks later, we go back to that customer and enter the meeting. But we hear something else. The surprise is they said, wait, we cannot deploy your service. And I tell them, we respect your decision, that's fine, but tell us why. The reason was that that customer already had a contract with an existing MSP, managed services provider. And that other company that was contracted to manage some related set of applications and infrastructure for them said that if they were to use a cloud service, although the cloud service may be more feature rich and solving more problems out of the gate, that they would no longer support that customer. And that ended up slowing down that deployment, at least for the foreseeable future. To sort of go beyond the US, the next story I have for you is for an international customer. So we'd gone ahead and, one of the nice things about building out cloud services. And I don't know which breakout room you were in for those of you who joined early, but the breakout room that I was in, we were chatting about how there is certain things that you can do in the cloud, which you just cannot do on premises. And in that capacity, we had gone ahead and built out this really interesting set of applications. One of the other themes was we shared like, how if anybody was to come and access the customer's data while they use the specific cloud service, that we had built out all of these interesting ways where you would know, the customer would know if, we jokingly said, even if somebody like lifted a finger, touched the keyboard, you'd see these special events, you'd know exactly what was happening. And guess what the customer said? The customer said, all of your cool tech is nice and interesting, but for me to use this product, it needs to continue to meet my auditor's needs. There's a good relationship they had set up with their auditors. The auditor expected to see certain things a certain way. And all of that cool tech was for nothing if we could not go ahead and provide those types of inputs. So that was sort of the homework for us to take back as a feature request and work on it and come back. And sometimes it comes down to, even when you've done all the right things and have the right collateral ready, you run into interesting types of reputation challenges. The final customer story I have for you, the department was super excited. The decision maker was all in, said they wanted to deploy. But one of the other C-level executives at the company thought thought that our company wasn't really suited for the type of product we were trying to get them to deploy. We never learned or heard of a specific objective reason, no feature deficiency, no SLA issue, nothing, but just a reputation in their mind that there's a certain type of company that go to for a product like that. And that ended up slowing down the adoption. And so one of the things, as you sort of look back at these 6 examples from over the last few years, which I've come across, I just wanted to take a step back and think about, well, what is it that makes cloud products so unique? In fact, that was one of the questions that came up in our breakout room before the meeting, before the session started. And so to start unpacking that, let's think about for a minute, like what are consumer products like and how are they adopted? A lot of the times, there is a single decision maker for a consumer product. Some cases, there's more than one, but for the most part, like you decide which app you'd like to use. For instance, at the turn of the year, I was in the market looking for a new and updated to-do app. I have an app which I use to track to-dos, but one of the things that I'm looking for is something that balances making it easy for me to enter my to-dos and tasks as they occur to me throughout the day through either my laptop or my phone or even other interfaces like speech. But then it also makes it easy for me to just ignore a few things like don't, show me these again till the weekend so that I can focus on these more important ones. But I want to feel confident that they won't get lost. And it's really easy to be able to move tasks in and out. I still have not found my perfect to-do app yet, by the way. So if you have suggestions, please throw them into the chat or, share back later in the open mic section. But at the end of the day, when I do find that app that I'm excited about, I'll just start using it. And when you come to enterprise software, things start like getting quite different. It's quite a bit more complex. You're still probably solving one user's or one department's problems, but a lot of the other stakeholders often need to approve the application before it's deployed. And the nice thing to think about is like not all departments inside the company, inside your customer, will be incentivized to grow their business. Some roles, such as security, legal, accounting, they just have a different incentive, which is also important for the customer, just to make sure that the right things happen, that things don't get out of hand, reputation of the company is protected, and the right processes are followed. And so you run into this other set of complexities that comes up with things like budgets and fiscal years, or for instance, compliance, regulations. Sometimes the enterprise sales cycle is typically longer. So while you're in the middle of a deal, you end up having a leadership change at the customer. And the new leader that they've brought in comes in with a different set of preferences, biases, and different business priorities. And so all of these things can end up making enterprise software deployment tricky. When you think about cloud products, which is a special variant in many ways of these enterprise products, you end up with a different set of things to think about. Now, a lot of you are working in the industry. One of the folks in our breakout room had just completed a cloud certification. Congratulations. So you're probably familiar with the different types of cloud products. So I'll do a super quick intro to just level set us. At a high level, one of the classifications is you have infrastructure as a service, which is you're effectively renting out the infrastructure that's provided by a cloud provider. The second is platform as a service. Then you're writing to a different set of APIs, which hopefully have you worrying about fewer things. One of the other folks in our breakout rooms was sharing how they work in an e-commerce company. And so when you have spikes, for example, if you have used PaaS, the service may just make it easy to automatically scale up to the increased load and bring it back down, for instance. And when you're working with the third type product, which is typically called SaaS or software as a service, you're really consuming the functionality as a service. You don't manage the infrastructure, somebody else does, and you just use it. Across all three of these, what's important is that in cloud products, it becomes pretty critical to be able to work with the rest of the ecosystem of products and applications. If an IaaS product cannot work well with the customer's other infrastructure, it probably won't be that useful. If a SaaS application cannot consume the outputs of another service that they may be running on a different cloud provider or on premises, its utility is probably going to end up getting diminished. And so these are some considerations we can think about what's unique about these types of cloud products. The other thing in cloud products is how trends sometimes tend to play out in a very different and occasionally unexpected ways. To share an example of that, I'm going to take you back in time some 4 or 5 years and share with you an example which some of you may be familiar with, but I think there's some interesting product learnings to take away as well, even if you are. So on November 8th, 2016, India's Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, made a surprising television appearance, and he shared that as of midnight that night, all of the 500 and 1000 rupee notes, a certain denomination, which accounted for 86% of the country's currency in cash and notes, would be no longer legal tender. There was a process. People could come to banks and get their notes exchanged and take away the new form currency notes. But because it would take a while for these to get distributed, there would be certain limits on how many new notes could you take away in a day. And this is pretty interesting to think about because those of you who are a little bit familiar with how Indian economy works, it is to a large extent still heavily cash-driven economy. And so that same day, this decision, when it came through, Paytm's founder Vijay was at a business event in Mumbai. He was seated for dinner along with many other folks. And one of the things he realized as these messages started trickling in on WhatsApp was that if anybody had a problem to this new change called as demonetization, it was Paytm. The reason was Paytm had built out this digital wallet, just like how we might use different types of digital wallets or mobile payment solutions to pay each other. Paytm had this ready for cashless transactions. And because commerce still needed to happen in this environment, one of the things that you ended up realizing is that now Paytm's digital wallet was the right product at the right time to facilitate digital transactions. And so in a matter of days, you saw not just brick and mortar shops, but even folks selling vegetables and street side vendors put up these Paytm QR codes with their merchant QR codes, which customers could scan to make digital payments to them. And so there's an interesting product lesson hiding in here in terms of having the right product ready. 6 months after that announcement, Paytm had raised over $1 billion in cash in new capital. 1 year after that initial announcement, Paytm's user base had more than doubled year on year. Another trend which a lot of us may have experienced, more deeply and personally over the last year is how the whole year 2020 ended up evolving in very unexpected ways. For example, for me, it seemed like things were going pretty normal in February and March. I attended that Products at Count talk that I told you about in person in early February. Later in Feb, I went up to San Francisco to attend a conference. I did end up making a stop again at Blue Bottle Coffee. I do enjoy and recommend that. And we had a deep conversation with an industry contact. Over the course of the coffee, we chatted about some interesting trends that were emerging. Felt like things were pretty normal. I thought I had a pretty active April plan with another conference early in the month and a special wedding to attend in the second half of the month. But then very quickly, COVID happened. I'm personally thankful and grateful to have escaped it relatively unscathed, but it ended up being very disruptive to a lot of people. A huge shout out before I continue to all the frontline workers and folks in medicine and other professions, allowing us to have these types of conversations so normally today. But even for all the information technology workers, like our lives changed. Since we could no longer get back to our offices, what happened? We started using video calls more, Zoom more. The same tool that we're using today for this virtual webinar suddenly felt like Zoom was the right type of product at the right time. And as the year progressed, Zoom's adoption like really has been through the roof. You've seen what what the company's been through. It's been an amazing year for them. What might be the next trend that ends up getting suddenly accelerated? Your crystal ball is as good as mine. But for the parts of the industry that I keep closer tabs on, I think one of the interesting things, perhaps a little scary to be honest, is what's happening with the SolarWinds Orion breach. Some of you may have heard about this and are reading about this in the papers. Bruce Schneier is a very well respected voice in the world of computer security, and he's indicated on his blog that this type of an attack is not that easy to detect. The specific software that was breached ended up being utilized by apparently some 300,000 customers, 425 of the Fortune 500 companies. Schneier believes that we need to invest more in securing the software supply chain to really be able to get over this type of an attack in the future. There's inevitably going to be a certain class of products that will end up getting used more through this transition or other transitions that you might notice closer to your parts of the industry that you work in day to day. But I think in this trend is also sometimes room to have like interesting opportunities emerge. Before I go deeper into it, I know it's like January, first week of Jan. A lot of you probably had good like New Year Eves, maybe a little different than other years. For me, it was interesting to see that at the turn of the year, my brother-in-law sent me a video on WhatsApp. And that video was Boston Dynamics robots dancing to Do You Love Me? If you have not seen that video, I do recommend it. You should go and check it out. Just Google or YouTube for Boston Dynamics Do You Love Me? And you can't miss it. Now, if you do end up watching, you'll probably notice two things. First, I know a lot of us work with some very exciting tech on a day-to-day or at least a week-to-week basis. But you can't help but marvel at where our engineering accomplishments have come about. Like you have these robots dancing, and to see a robot do the twist, knowing that it's all like algorithmically controlled and programmed is pretty exciting. The second thing you'll notice, if you check out the views counter, that video is just about a week old. As I looked up the counter last evening, I noticed it had crossed 23 million views. Now, in consumer products, apps, consumer videos, they can go viral pretty quick. Enterprise product adoption tends to take quite a bit longer. And as product people, though, we can use that to our advantage. Going back to the trends that we were talking about, like the nice thing is you notice these trends, but then they're not going to end up going viral and like completely changing things overnight or within the course of a week. And so one of the things that I found useful is to identify clear and emerging trends and start building products while the trends are still emerging. They haven't fully established themselves. Start focusing on building the right type of product. That maybe the litmus test is if one of those unexpected accelerants was to come by, like would yours be the product? Would yours be the video conferencing tool that ends up going viral and getting adopted in a big way? And even if one of those accelerants doesn't come through, if you're building the right type of a product on an emerging trend, you're going to see interesting organic adoption automatically as time goes by. The other thing to think about is, how is your product fitting in with other players in the industry? For example, if you're a new company, could another company with thousands of existing cloud tenants and customers help you get adoption from the beginning? Or if your core value add is fast analytics, can integrating with a software managed cloud service help you stay focused on building out your analytical capabilities and not get distracted trying to build out the rest of the infrastructure? Or are you hitting an area where you need a certain type of expertise to go deeper and you don't have that, but somebody else in the industry has already developed that type of an expertise, and by partnering with them or integrating your product with them, you both can end up getting better mutual adoption. So these are some themes that we can derive value as product people and setting up the right types of integrations and partnerships. The next couple of examples, by the way, I'm going through 6 of these suggestions. And as you hear me talk through them, you'll see parallels back to those 6 customer stories we discussed at the start of the talk. Remember that 14-year-old company veteran, really super well skilled and able master of their craft? So one of the things to think about is anytime there is friction, like how can we go ahead and reduce that friction? So for that veteran, if that person was to get reskilled in using cloud products and technologies, can we architect that reskilling in a manner where they go ahead and reskill themselves once, and then they can go ahead and manage and monitor 4 different deployments instead of needing to learn a special way of managing one specific cloud deployment piecemeal? The other thing is, like when we build out these products, it is interesting to think about how can they interoperate with other cloud products and other services. Customers worry about like bespoke technology or vendor lock-ins. And if you end up designing your products to be more interoperable, odds are that they will be able to also benefit from shifts that are happening by other companies and other technologies because your product will be able to work better with them. The last thing to think about is what are the typical adoption blockers you might come across, and setting out a product roadmap that prioritizes going after them in an interesting sequential manner, but really does a good job saluting the basics well, thinking about which type of compliance standards are important for your product to be able to meet, supporting auditing, allowing export of data, and so on. Reputation of your company, that just builds over time. But there are certain things that we can do to try and make that easier. For instance, going ahead and sharing more about your specific service. How have you designed it? Perhaps partnering with your engineering or like technical salespeople to write out blogs that explain how support is handled, how certain things are designed. All of these help increase customer confidence. Writing out white papers, customer reference studies in cases where you can publish them, and just being more active on some industry events and blogs can also end up making a meaningful difference. So as we sort of start, bringing these themes together to the final couple of slides here, so you probably want to start thinking about questions and comments you want to make. I thought I'd share this with you in terms of what is the cloud product approach. And I think about this from 2 lenses. The first one is how do you go ahead and build out a way to deliver value for cloud products? At its heart, like a lot of other products, it comes down to solving a real problem for a specific target persona that makes a meaningful difference in their use case while plugging in well to the rest of the ecosystem. To illustrate this, I'll take an example of Okta. A lot of you are probably familiar with Okta or Bitium or products like this, which your company probably uses to let you have, be able to log on to the company systems and then have a single click sign on to those other applications. And so Okta at this point is, over $30 billion in market cap. The company's been around for a few years. It's IPO'd a few years ago. But I think it really did a good job solving 2 or 3 sets of related problems. One is you have these types of on-premises directory stores or identity stores starting to get fragmented. Second, application software, which historically used to be managed and deployed by the company, started getting deployed more often in the cloud. And the third problem was just setting up the connectivity and getting identity and authentication working between those apps and those user identities after the users logged on was tricky. And so they targeted on a few key personas and made a big difference. IT admins found it was easy and predictable to configure these applications. End users really liked the fact that they could log on once, did not have to remember a separate password for each application or type in that password over and over again in a bunch of different places. And app developers liked the fact that there was more standardized ways of onboarding to their applications, which helped them get more users using their apps quickly. The last bit is worth emphasizing is that this product also integrates in well with the ecosystem. So if you go ahead and get Okta, they have an Okta integration network by which you have connectors to some 6,500 plus applications, which you just get single sign-on to once you're logged into Okta. So this is an example of how you can think about coming up with cloud products and delivering value. The other axis by which you can think about is, once you have found your core value prop, you've solved the MVP, you think you have a good product in place, It's important to also make sure you're thinking about removing the adoption blockers or roadblocks. And what are some ways in which this comes about? The first one is reliability and uptime. One of the comments that was made in our breakout room as we were chatting before the session is somebody mentioned that they expect more when they're using a cloud provider to be able to have higher uptime. And they expect that, especially the large cloud providers, someone with a lot of experience, are able to actually have higher uptime and be able to get through tricky weeks like Thanksgiving weeks when you might have spikes much better and be able to build out those cloud services. And that is something which you can do as long as you make sure you prioritize for it and have the right type of engineering investments in your roadmap to help make that happen. The second thing is when it comes to a lot of enterprise software, especially cloud, customers tend to like predictable pricing. I mean, none of your customers would probably want to go back and tell their bosses that this month the cloud bill is 5 times what it was last month because of some spike which was not fully anticipated. So if we can come up with more predictable pricing models, it'll probably make customers starting to get more excited about using your service. The third is this model of shared responsibility, which is anytime you're building and deploying something in the cloud, there are things that the cloud service provider or the cloud service owner provides. And then there is some modicum of responsibility that rests on the customers. When software is running in the cloud, customers can typically control a lot less of what is running behind the scenes. And so setting these expectations upfront and in a consistent and clear way tends to be helpful for everybody. These are the things we worry about. These are the things we'd like you to please keep tabs on. The next theme came up, in fact, in an interesting conversation. I was chatting with Kavita, another product manager, a couple of weeks ago, and she shared this interesting insight that in her experience, starting to use cloud products, the easier that we can make it for somebody to just get going with a trial or like just starting to use it without a lot of time investment, money investment upfront, more dividends it pays in terms of the adoption down the line. And the interesting thing is when you're doing this with cloud services, you can actually go ahead and, if you just think through them, set these in place much more easily than if it was more traditional on-premises software. And finally, it's nice to always arm your decision maker in the company with the right type of collateral, the type of things we spoke about, white papers, reports, and other things, so they can go ahead and convince other stakeholders within their organization. So these are a few perspectives, things that we can do to try and drive adoption for cloud products. I'm definitely happy to take any questions and also keen to hear about your comments and perspectives. With that, over to you, Neha.
Thank you, Siddharth. That was great. Very valuable. We've not covered this topic about cloud product management and definitely opened up my eyes to and also reminded how complex it can be. So there's consumer tech, there's B2B SaaS, and then there's cloud. So the level of complexity just is pretty incremental at each of these stages. We're open for questions. I didn't see anything on chat, but I can get us started with a few questions. So let me try demonstrating. Yeah. So one of the questions I had to that was, how can PMs prepare and calibrate towards black swan events like demonetization in India, the pandemic? What can we do in order to, especially when you're managing complex products that takes a while to build as well as to get adopted? How do we keep up?
Yeah, great question. The first thing I'll say is, when it comes to Black Swan events, don't listen to me. Go and listen to, I hope I'm pronouncing his first name right, Nicholas Taleb. He's literally written the book on it and given that a lot more thought. But there are a few things that we can do as PMs. The first, maybe to start with, the theme of the day is the nice thing is even as product managers, and I realize we rely a lot on engineering and technical leads to make important architecture and design decisions. But if we can start to think about leveraging cloud technologies more, that can actually allow us to come up with products that much more easily scale up the moment you get lucky or you have your Black Swan event, as you just described. For example, like if your core value prop is appropriately figured out, you have been iterating on the MVP, you have things figured out right, then the day you have that unanticipated 10x, 50x growth in usage, if you've used the right type of cloud technologies to build out your product, you will easily ride the benefits of that versus finding that it is much harder for you to be able to scale your service now in that short amount of time. The
Mhm.
second thing we can do is, and this we touched upon a little bit in the talk, but I'm happy to explain that more clearly, is to some extent, like unless you have a much nicer crystal ball than I do, it's hard to really get ahead of which these black swan events might be or when they might happen just by definition. But the thing that we can do is think about certain emerging trends. Depending on, like, somebody was in our breakout room was in e-commerce. So which type of trends do you see playing out in e-commerce? The ones that feel like they're real enough, I think if you go ahead and start building your product or service to take good advantage of that as a product person, a product manager, or product lead in a technical capacity, then what you will find is even without the black swan event, you would end up seeing the benefits of attaching yourself to that trend.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from David. David, do you want me to read the question or? Okay. So the question is, do you find that the sales pitch must be tailored for different functional units for the customer's organization? Or it's one thing to talk about different stakeholders, it's another to be heard properly by different types of stakeholders. It's a general question, but if one of the core values you can offer as a provider to your client is easy way to convince different stakeholders, whether it's in finance, marketing, or operations, how should one think about the sales pitch?
Great question, David. And I think it's a really nice question because it builds upon one of the themes we touched upon in the talk. To just quickly recap that theme first, you are often, meeting the needs of a specific user in that organization, but before they can deploy it, probably a bunch more need to feel comfortable with your product or service. And so I think in that capacity, again, a lot of that depends on, how large is the account, what vertical the customer is in, what expectation does the customer have of products similar to the one that you're building? And as I explained in the one case, what reputation or what type of an image does your company have in that customer's mind for that type of product? But generally, and so I think you should decide based on that. Usually what I found is it's helpful to scale as somebody who's especially in, product or a generic sales function to go ahead and build out a generic deck that explains what problem is your product solving, who is it solving for, how is it that the customer is going to be better off potentially using your product versus trying to solve that type of problem on their own, and have this generic pitch deck, which can sometimes get customized, based on who the customer is, and then have separate collateral for those other functions. For example, you might have a formal SLA document or just set expectations if you don't have an official SLA, very neatly written out, which may be in a PDF or a separate website that they could share off to the right people. You might have something separate for legal and licensing considerations. You might have something that explains the pricing model or a TCO model for people who are thinking about it from a finance perspective. So generic product deck with maybe like one pager or info sheets for the other functions tends to be typically a good way to scale. Thank you, David. Good question.
Nice. Okay. Are there other questions? If not, then I'll go with, okay, to talk about, I have another one. What advice do you have for PMs to keep their pulse on emerging trends? And then I'll tag along my other question. How do you validate whether it's a trend to plan towards versus a fad? Like, right? Like there's schools of thoughts around remote work. We wouldn't know until we come out of this pandemic, but people are bullish that this will stay. So curious about your thoughts as a senior product leader on how do PMs plan for these scenarios.
Great question. Yeah, I think I'll answer that question, but I'd also, maybe encourage people to start getting a little bit more closer to their keyboards. I am still waiting on the to-do list recommendations, by the way. So whichever is your favorite app, I'd love to hear more about it in the comments. But to answer the question, yeah, I think, there's a variety of different ways you can try and stay on top of trends. I'll first start by saying it is a tricky problem, and even I find it hard, especially these days when there is so much information, news, we're just consuming info from a variety of different outlets all the time, constantly. But I think if I had to maybe boil it down to three top level sets of things, one is if you're already working in that company, in that organization, or you already have a set of target customers or users in mind, I'd probably start by just listening to them. Not necessarily things that they're describing are wrong or feature requests, that's helpful too. But just listening and going through their experiences. What are they hearing about? What are emerging business priorities for them? What is it that's a big initiative, in their organization? Those types of things are often very real clues, and they're relevant for you because these are your customers or target customers. So I think that's first is just listen to your customers, keep close tabs on what's happening in their lives that's important and that they're sharing with you. The second is just going ahead and signing up for certain types of like online blogs, alerts. Like there's Google Alerts. I have those set up for a few phrases. Then there's certain blogs. Like I mentioned, I know some things in security a lot more that Bruce Schneier does. And so I'll go and check in on his blog every once in a while. So you can definitely sign up for important newsletters. If you're interested in product, the Products That Count newsletter is probably a good way to get those resources. Signing up for the right type of resources and checking in regularly is the second thing. The third thing is to just sort of, I think, try and connect more than one domain that you happen to be familiar with will probably have you picking up on trends that maybe are not getting picked up in mainstream media. For instance, if you're somebody who's super passionate about the outdoors, enjoys hiking and enjoys camping, and then you read up something about IoT and you try and keep tabs on that, then that might spark off interesting ideas of like, wait, these are new types of IoT devices which could be really helpful when people are outdoors. And you might try and like then detect and explore that trend a little bit more clearly yourself in an individual capacity. Hopefully it's fun, and then you might come up with some interesting insights which aren't yet getting picked up a lot by other folks.
Super helpful. Um, we have a question from Kelsey, just asking similarly to this topic, any tips for those interested on pivoting into product from a general internal strategy role?
Good question. I think really good question. The first thing is like when it comes to product management, there is definitely a clear subset of product management that relates to strategy, right? And so if you have if you have a knack of being able to come up with the right type of strategic insights and helping steer things a certain way, that definitely can help with product. To be a little bit candid though, like for most products, a lot of the times, especially as you're starting out in product management, there's definitely an element of coming up with the right type of insights, but a lot of the dividends tend to come from good execution. And I think one of the couple of things I'll suggest is, just starting to read up more, which you probably are doing, attending sessions like this, and from many folks who are, a lot more learned and capable than me, just listening to them talk about PM and core PM skills is one generic way to get exposed. But the second thing is to really try and arrive at specific problems and think about which types of problems can product really help uniquely solve, and starting to then push them a little bit more, take them to the next level. For example, think about an interesting strategy. If you think that's going to help solve an important problem that is important enough, like matters to a lot of people, has a lot of business potential, just as a big pain point a lot of people are facing, and then trying to get that to the next level, maybe going and brainstorming and drawing out some rough mocks, even if they're just sketches of what that experience might look like, or pairing up with an engineering buddy, or just taking a couple of basic courses to try and come up with some type of a prototype or a mock, and then show that to people, try and get feedback on that to try and refine it. I think just three, four, five of these types of initiatives on your own, done on the side, probably start honing your product sense. And I'd recommend doing this for the type of product which you think you'd be excited to build, or the type of product that your company already builds, if you're thinking of an internal pivot, which your question implies. And I think that'll open up the right type of conversations and hopefully more natural paths to try and pivot to product management.
Thank you.
I can add another tip, Kelsey. Just interview a lot, do recreational interviewing. I have learned so much from just recreational interviewing about product management in general that, and Siddharth knows a secret behind it too. So I'll encourage doing that as well. Okay, fun question from Bill. How can you stay up with these cybersecurity hacks? Those people live in a different dimension. Even they are getting surprised.
Yeah, well, this one I'll have to confess I don't have a good answer to, because you're right. Unfortunately, we are seeing more and more of these types of breaches come by. And I mean, I think that obviously this latest one is top of mind for me, and for a lot of people. What's also been getting different is the level of impact that you've had with more and more of these breaches over the years. What are some ways you can try and stay up to date? I think the one of the nice things, like a silver lining, is I feel like there is more mainstream media attention to these types of issues. I remember a few years ago, when one of the major credit bureaus got hacked and a lot of SSNs were compromised. I'm thankful that there was a lot of scrutiny on that issue in mainstream media, and so a lot of people care. And yes, there was a lot of passion and excitement about that. This specific issue that I alluded to a few minutes ago, I think the exact ramifications of that will take some time to play out. But in general, I think there is more and more cybersecurity newsletters. One of the things I personally find useful, I should probably do more of this, is I'm somewhat active on Twitter, but probably not as much as I should be. Listening to and just following tweets from like some of the key folks in the industry that are talking about these topics, cybersecurity or others that interest you, and though especially the tweets that end up getting more attention, even if you just sort of glance on them, they tend to hold important clues, and it's just quick to and easy to consume to at least keep tabs on what's happening. The specifics, the complexity of the attacks, the level of sophistication, that's rising more and more. And so I look to the Bruce Schneiers of the world to help me wade through that.
Very valuable. Maintain like a group of influencers in your area of interest, that who can help you learn. It's awesome. Okay, any other questions from the group?
Can I just shout it out?
Yes.
What is your favorite product that you use for work?
Great question. First, I'll say, Sharon, thank you for that question. I did see your recommendation flying by. Interesting, you for the to-do list app. Sharon recommends Trello. By the way, thank you. I looked at Trello many years ago when I was investigating certain types of project tracking products. I have not thought about it for personal use. I'll definitely go and give that a second try. Um, to your question about what is my favorite product for work, gosh, I'm probably going to say a lot of the usual things. So maybe I'll tell you a specific feature in a product more than the product. The product is first just answer. Yeah, I think it's Zoom these days. It's Zoom. My new organization uses Slack quite a bit, which my old organization didn't. So I'm becoming more of a slacker, though hopefully not in a negative sense as time goes by. They're probably my top two. But I'll share with you an interesting feature. I had been using Google Slides for the longest time, and for like ease of sharing and things, it's definitely worth it. One of the interesting discoveries I had is if you use Microsoft PowerPoint, there is a design ideas section, and hopefully my slides today did not end up looking too bad, and I take zero credit for it. The interesting thing is, as you go ahead and you type out your like text that you want to do, design ideas will just help provide you with some slide templates, and it'll automatically format it, and you can pick and choose which one you like. I think Ankit, if I may put you on the spot, in our breakout room, you were chatting about what type of things can you do with ML and like with more system smarts. And in a personal productivity capacity, I really like that idea that PowerPoint did, where you type out the words, it really like helps suggest the right type of formatting and visuals. For somebody who's creatively challenged to an extent, such as myself, it's a blessing. It's probably my favorite enterprise feature. Thank you for asking.
That's really good. Yeah. So now we know the secret to clean, crisp slides.
Yeah, leave it to AI, leave it to system smarts for sure.
It's interesting watching kids use it. Okay, we've got about 6 more minutes. Open mic, you can share a project you're working on. If you're looking for a job, or if you're hiring in your company, or if you want to ask anything else, we've got a few more minutes before we call it a wrap.
Great question. I guess I'll set the stage and warm things up. Definitely excited to be at Splunk. We are hiring across the board. There is, immediate positions in the team that I'm part of, others in other parts of the company that I highly recommend. Everything should be up on the careers website, so please check it out and reach out. Who'd like to go next?
I like the piano. Sounds really good.
Yeah, so see the fact that you can hear the piano is just background music. We just planted that in, hoping that there'll be more like questions in the open mic, but to get things started.
Sure,
Yeah.
I'll jump in with the hiring one as well. I actually just joined Mighty Capital, very excited about the journey up ahead. I'm also excited to tell you that Mighty Capital is growing and we are hiring a senior associate. So if you like venture, if you like tech, if you like, learning about new products and playing around and demoing with other products, feel free to ping me or check out our website for more information.
Thank you, Sharon.
I'll piggyback on that and just say that the product awards are coming up at the beginning of March. If you guys don't know about that, it's where we celebrate the best in product. And 2020 was a very interesting year. So we're going to have some really exciting things coming up. So go ahead and check out the link that I dropped in the chat, and registration is now open.
Yeah, and so that's a great place to see all kinds of products, collaboration, personal project management. So products that count collates thousands of companies and products that are there, tools that are designed for product managers, and then categorize them and have a whole voting process that goes to show which products are best designed and most effective for product management. So if you're looking for specific tools, then take a chance to look at all the options we have on that site.
Nice, great to hear more about it.
Okay, is everybody based in the Bay Area? We've got participants from other areas as well.
I'm in Southern California.
Boston.
Boston must be late for you, Bill. Thank you for joining. David, what about you? Are you in the West Coast too?
I think David was on mute, but if I lip read, that's right. San Francisco, I was about to say,
Correct.
okay.
Yeah, and I was not drinking Blue Bottle coffee just now.
Thank you. I did discover quite late, I should admit, that Blue Bottle Coffee has a nice outlet in Santana Row as well, in San Jose at Santana Row. But still, for me, that's one of the canonical things about SF city trips.
If you ever need another coffee recommendation, I randomly worked in the coffee roasting space years ago, and feel free to ping me, but a great one in the Bay Area is Equator, across the Bay.
Thank you. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
Really great spot.
Equator. Oh, interesting. Costco has Blue Bottle too, apparently.
After all that discussion of cloud product adoption, here we're talking about analog drugs.
Well, I really appreciate everyone joining. I know today has been an unusual day with the events in our country. So thank you for taking out the time, Siddharth, especially for all the preparation, for sharing your knowledge, and for helping us learn about cloud product management. Yes, yay, Sharon. Claps for an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
And for our audience, these slides and this recording will be available online. You might also get an NPS survey, which helps us provide feedback to our speakers on what went well, what could they do differently going forward. And it also helps us improve our webinar formats. And if there are other topics and other areas of interest that you would like us to bring more experienced speakers in, please ping them to me. I can also be reached through LinkedIn, or you can send some feedback directly in the NPS survey that we'll send out. On that note, we can call it a wrap. And if you all want to hang out and network, that's also an option. But we can thank Siddharth for his time and record. Okay, so we've got a question from Bill. Recordings online means, Reese, do you want to answer that? It's going to be uploaded on our website.
Yeah, we put all of our videos, they go to Vimeo, but we also create content afterwards that give a nice summary of the discussion, and then the video itself connected to our blog on productsthatcount.com. So you'll be able to find it there, and we'll post it through social, so it'll be visible.
Bill, it's productsthatcount.com. So maybe we'll just post it there. Okay. Thank you all. Thank you, Siddharth. Really appreciate it. It was a great conversation. And thank you to the audience as well.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Really enjoyed chatting with you. Appreciate your time.